First and foremost, give all praise to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and his son, the Hamashiach, who some call Yahushua, Yehoshua, Yeshua, so forth. We mostly know as Jesus Christ. We want to get into a lot of people talk about is cursing biblical. And when I say cursing, I mean foul language. Should we be out there teaching using foul language? And when people try to correct you or correct those who are using this language, they try to say, well, show me in the Bible where it's a sin for me to use foul language. Or they will try to reference certain words in the text and say, well, it's in the Bible. And so, why can't I use it that way? And my first initial bite back to that, are you letting your kids say that within your house? And if not, why not? Are you letting your kids call their mama a B? Are you allowing your kids to call you a nigga? Are you allowing your kids to use the A word or any other word that's deemed inappropriate for young people to be using, that society has deemed inappropriate? Are you allowing your kids to talk in that manner to you and other adults? And if that answer is no, if he call his mama, if your son call his mama the B word and say, hey man, that's in the Bible. Let me show you in Sirach. It's just a female dog, Dad. And I'm sure, I would like to think, let me say that, I'm not gonna say I'm sure, I would like to think that you wouldn't allow your kids to speak in that manner, and that you would have deemed that kind of speech inappropriate. But while we out here talking on these highways and byways, we don't think, we feel we can speak any way we want to. We want to speak exactly the way the world speaks. And when somebody tries to give us correction or has an offense to that sort of language, instead of you accepting the correction or apologizing for the offense, we try to defend that kind of language. So we're just going to read a couple of verses here dealing with language. 2 Timothy 2:14, it says, of these things put in remembrance, charging them before the Lord, that they strive not about words to no profit, but to the subverting of the hearers. Now Paul's telling Timothy here, it's just, the back and forth, some words, some things that we out here speaking, it's not profitable. It's not profitable to convert in that hearer, to bring in that here, give that hearer exactly what he needs. And some words aren't necessary. Some language isn't necessary. All right. Colossians chapter 4 verse 6, it says, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt. And that's a merciful speech. That's not a speech that want to bite back at jokers. Hey man, we ain't these Christians, man. We'll whoop your. Oh, I can't wait to slap the taste out your. B, I wasn't even looking at you like that anyway. And calling people names, even calling people devils. It can be offensive to people. It's not whether you feel it's true or not. It's offensive. We have to evaluate that. Let your speech always be seasoned with grace, seasoned with salt. And that salt, again, we talked about that. That's a preserver. That salt is a preserver. It ain't just flavor, but salt preserves. All right. You want to preserve the listener. You want to preserve the listener so it can endure to salvation. You don't want to offend this preserver and make them mad, make them hot, and they run off. that you may know how you ought to answer every man. All right. And you should know how to answer every man, and you should study. You should be studying. And not just the text, but studying people, studying different personality types. And some of this comes with trial and error of being out there. Sometimes you're gonna miss, sometimes, and then when you miss, you think about those things like, hey man, you know what, I might have should have said this, I might have should have said it this way. And you learn from those experiences. So you can come to the point where you know how to answer every man. It's a lot of times where we see Christ being kind of trying to be manipulated by the Pharisees when they're questioning, but he already understood. He already knew what they were trying to do. Just understanding, it didn't have to be no omnipresent type thing, but just understanding their desires and what their desires were rooted in. That they were really trying to trip him up, understanding what they really was trying to do. And you can see that with people, and people can see that with us. Titus chapter 2 and verse 7. I deem myself very high in understanding, questioning, understanding why people ask me certain questions, or understanding why they're doing something. Sometimes if I see the phone ring, I know why you calling. I can know because of certain things that already done transpired. I know what the conversation's about to be about. And sometimes I have to pretend like I don't, because you might get spooked out that I know. Anyway, I don't want to get into it. Titus 2, 7 and 8. It says, in all things showing thyself a pattern of good works. Okay, in all things. Not some things, not a few things. In all things showing thyself a pattern of good work. Are we doing this on the highways and byways? Are we showing patterns of good work where somebody else will vouch for us? Do we have a good report among the nation like Cornelius had? Whether you think he a Jew or a Gentile, either way it go, he had a good report where people were vouching for him. People were vouching for the centurion. Man, he helped us build this synagogue. He had a pattern of good works. Your alms have been taken up, and your prayers have been heard because of this good report. Do we have a pattern of good report among the Gentiles, among these other nations, among the world? Or do we have a pattern of offenses? A pattern of things that the world can blame us and say, well, nah, that ain't, if they're representing that God, I don't want to represent that God. I don't want to be dealing with no God like that. Not with theirs. Not if he allowing them to do that foolishness. I don't know what that is, and this why your speech got to be blameless. We're gonna get into that too. I think that's the next one. Verse 7 again. In all things showing thyself a pattern of good works, in doctrine showing uncorruptness, gravity, and sincerity. All right, is the doctrine uncorruptness? Is it uncorruptible, or are there holes? And if there are holes, we gonna have to plug those holes up. We gonna have to have certain dialogues to plug these holes up. Uncorruptness, no pre-notions, no eisegeting. All right, putting our pre-notions into the text, and gravity and sincerity. And that gravity goes into just purity, and sincerity does too. Just being pure. No matter how we feel about what it's saying what it's saying. No matter how we feel about certain speech that we use, hey man, it's not really that offensive to me, but it may be offensive to your brother. Then you need to stop. And Paul goes into that with the food, but also with the speech. If you're speaking to somebody, they find these things to be offensive, just stop. Sound speech, sound. Okay. And that takes development. that cannot be condemned, that he that is of the contrary part may be ashamed. Okay, he that has an opposing view, he will be ashamed because your speech is so sound. All right, it's so proven, it's so well tested. There's no holes in it, there's no corruptness being shown in it. He that has the opposing view may be ashamed, having no evil thing to say of you. The world shouldn't have no evil thing to say of us. All right, if we're teaching if we're teaching the way Paul's instructing Titus and instructing Timothy, we shouldn't have. Our goal is, I'm not gonna say we shouldn't have, but our goal should be, where the world cannot say an evil thing. All they have to say is good things, and even when they're saying, they're trying to make up stuff about us. We have a certain reputation where, don't, even other people are vouching for us, even from other nations, like, wherever those people are, good things are happening. All right. The streets are cleaning up. The gangs and stuff are even respect them. And they deem these people of great reverence. Their children are excellent within our school systems. They give us the least amount of problems. Their wives dress respectable. They're in a respectable manner. You don't see them out here whoring themselves on the street corners. They out there ministering to certain sisters, trying to get them off the streets. They have shelters. They do these. They have this kind of program. They got this. They got that. Where the city is referencing you, even when they're bringing up false charges or something like that, and other people like, nah, we ain't going for that. But we very far from that level right now. Now we at a point now where if somebody's saying something contrary to us, a lot of Israelites is, we got our head down like, yeah, we gotta pray for them brothers. Yeah, that was us. That was our group. We ain't affiliated with them, but it's us. And a lot of that's coming about because we're not correcting each other. We've gotten far from that. That used to be there. And I think we got to get back to that season. Unfortunately, man, I think we're gonna have to get back to pulling up into and having certain dialogues, even if it's on the phone or whatever the case may be. 2 Corinthians 11:6, it says, be thou, Shalakia, but though I be rude in speech, yet not in knowledge, but we have been thoroughly made manifest among you in all things. All right, but we have been thoroughly made manifest among you in all things. All right, I've developed certain manifestations among you, but this is the part we want to deal with. Though I be rude in speech, and a lot of times people use this. Hey, Paul even said, though I be rude in speech. Even Paul made that point. And we look here. Let's go to the interlinear. Though I be rude in speech. All right, we went to the interlinear here on the blue letter, and we're just finna go speeches logos. We're going to rudeness. We want to deal with that word rude. What does rude mean? Look at the word right there. You can tell it by the Greek. Idiostis, idiot. All right, so Paul's not saying that he's using foul language. Paul's saying that he doesn't have the best language. He doesn't have the fancy words and the fancy dialogue. Yet he still deems himself not inferior to these other people. But let's see here. There's a couple of uses here. A private person as opposed to a magistrate or ruler or king, a common soldier. Okay. But unlearned is the words here we use. You use 3 times for unlearned, ignorant, 1 time for rude. A common soldier as opposed to a military officer, a writer opposed to a poet, In the New Testament, an unlearned, illiterate man, as opposed to the learned and educated, one who is unskilled in any art, ignoramus, ignorant, rude, unlearned. Okay. Now, let's just look back at a little of the context here. It says, "For I suppose I was not a wit behind the very chiefest apostles." And what he's saying there is that I'm not inferior to these folks. All right. I'm on the same level, if not better, than your chiefest apostles. Okay. So you can go back in there and read that. I don't want to harping on that, but I hope y'all see that. Though I be rude in speech, is not talking about him using foul language, but more it's talking about that he doesn't have the flashes language. When there's somewhere else he talks about, he speaks on that also, that I didn't come to you with great speech and fancy words and so forth. I showed you the power of God. That's what I came and showed you. Anyway, we'll pull over, go to Ecclesiasticus Sirach. We're going to read it in the KJV, and then we'll read it in another translation just to get a little more context. Or not context, but a little more clarity. We'll start at verse 9. Accustom not thy mouth to swearing. This is Sirach chapter 23, or Ecclesiasticus chapter 23. Accustom not thy mouth to swearing, neither use thyself to naming of the Holy One. Now, when you see that, they're going to, a lot of times Israel say, well, no, that swearing means, cursing. Or when you use certain verses that say cursing, they're using that to say that's cursing someone, like putting a curse on someone. And that swearing is like swearing an oath or a curse or cursing someone. And so, and they're right. All right, they're right. In most of those cases, neither use thyself, and in this case here, neither use thyself to naming of the Holy One. And we have to be careful with that also. We go crazy with these name doctrines, but why do we ignore this? Everybody, we done read this in Sirach. It says it a few different times here about using that holy name. And we see the little hats, they will say, hey man, they'll say the Hashem. They'll just say the name. But maybe that custom of not naming probably stems a little further back than we thinking with the we thinking maybe there's some 15th, 16th century stuff where they start using Hashem, but I think maybe that custom came, 3rd, 4th century BC, maybe somewhere around there, or even before that time, even maybe coming out of Babylon. But it's here. However you feel about the Book of Sirach, we still know that this text was dated around 2nd century BC, and don't be doing all that naming of the Holy One, it says. Verse 10. Y'all hit the comments, tell me what y'all think about that one. Verse 10. For as the servant that is continually beaten shall not be without a blue mark, so he that sweareth in name of God continually shall not be faultless. A man that useth much swearing shall be filled with iniquity, and the plague shall never depart from his house. If he shall offend, his sin shall be upon him. And if he acknowledge not his sin, he maketh a double offense. And if he swear in vain, he shall not be innocent, but his house shall be full of calamities. There is a word that is clothed about with death. And I still will use that swearing there. I still will see that as I still will place that under the cursing and swearing an oath and so forth. And again, we so far from that culture and tradition in belief system in these certain deities, or even our connection to the Most High, that we barely we don't do that, man. We don't say, hey man, God, if I swear to, do 40-day fast and and then you don't do it, what I'm saying, you can fill your house with calamity, so forth. Anyway, you know, that's a lesson within itself, that swearing and making oaths and so forth. Looking into that history. Verse 12, there is a word that is clothed about with death. God granted that it be not found in the heritage of Jacob. For all such things shall be far from the godly, and they shall not wallow in their sins. And I think there's a word that is clothed about with death. Okay? It's clothed about with death. Don't let that thing be found among Jacob. Such things shouldn't be near a godly person. And they should not wallow in their sins. Verse 13, use not thy mouth in intemperate swearing. Now, what is that? Intemperate swearing. For therein is the word of sin. Use not thy mouth to intemperate, enrage swearing. And I think here we're getting into a more of what this class is about. Okay. And it's saying that, you shouldn't, this ain't no cursing in rage. And that's why I brought up this other translation too, so we can look into it. But this is getting into what we call cuss words today. All right. Name calling, jesting. And I should have pulled that verse too in Titus about no jesting. Let me see if I can find that real quick. No, it's not in Titus. It's in Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 4, 5 and verse 4. Neither filthiness nor foolish talking. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 4 says, neither filthiness nor foolish talking, nor jesting, which is not convenient, but rather giving of thanks. All right. Let's see the NLT. It says obscene stories, foolish talk, and coarse jokes. These are not for you. Instead, let there be thankfulness with God. So you got to be careful of that. And some of these words that we call in cuss words, it's a form of jesting. It's a form of, name calling. Where we at? Okay, the intemperate swearing. For there is the word of sin. Verse 14, remember thy father and mother when thou sittest among great men. Why is he telling you that? Remember your father and your mother, because you have a certain speech that you were taught within that house. You had a certain speech that you have around your mother and your father that you don't speak out there in the world. All right, most should have that. Today, these kids don't have that. These kids talk in the streets out there like they talk in the streets, and then they come home and they talk in the streets inside of the house. Because the house is the streets. It has the same values, has the same moral standards, has the same language. And us being lights, children of God, set apart holy, we supposed to be separate from the world, severed from the foolishness in the moral values of the world, and cleaned on to thus says the Lord. We should be operating differently. All right. They shouldn't just see us as Negroes with fringes, as I've seen some of us called. Anyway, be not forgetful before them, and so thou by thy custom become a fool, and wish that thou hadst not been born, and curse they day of thy nativity. And again, we see that phrase there. We see that also in Job. A lot of us use that Job to say, hey, well, Job said, curse the day he was born. But we see this phrase used not to curse his birthday, but to curse the fact that he was born. Like, I'd rather not even been born because of this shame that I'm going through, or because of this affliction that I'm going through. Job wished that he was never even born. And so the writer here is saying that be not forgetful before them, so that thy custom become a fool. All right, and wishing you becoming that fool, you'll end up wishing that you were never born. Verse 15, it says, the man that is accustomed to opprobrious words will never be reformed all the days of his life. What are opprobrious words? What is that? What does that mean? I got the definition here. Don't worry about it. A language expressing scorn or criticism. Okay. Opprobrious remarks. Okay. Derogatory. Degeneratory, provocative, abusive, insulting. All right. That's similar words. Oh, well, it's saying similar or opposite adjectives. But I think those are similar words there. That I was reading, but appropriate remarks. Now let's look at it in a different version here. This is the NRSV, and we see discipline of the tongue. This is still Sirach 23. Discipline of the tongue. We see here, do not be accustomed to your mouth to oaths. All right, that's what it was talking about, swearing. We see it in the KJV, verse 9, accompanies your mouth to swearing. They've translated oaths. All right, trying to limit the confusion. When you drop down to 12, now we get into foul language. There is a manner of speaking comparable to death. There is a way you can speak to a person that is comparable for death. May it not be found in the inheritance of Jacob. Such conduct should be far from godly, and they will not wallow in sins. Do not accustom your mouth to coarse, foul language, for it involves sinful speech. Remember your mother and your father when you sit among the great, or you may forget yourself in their presence. You may forget yourself. You may forget, the mannerisms, in the character and traits that you developed inside of that household, and lose yourself to the ways of the world, and behave like a fool through bad habit. Then you will wish that you had never been born, and you will curse the day of your birth. Those who are accustomed to using abusive language will never become disciplined as long as they live. Okay, and they translated that opprobrious words into abusive language. What would be abusive language? What we consider curse words today. That is abusive language. You'll see it in many court trials and many divorce cases where she thinks she was verbally abused with the words that were coming out of his mouth. And if we're using these same words out there on the teaching while we're teaching, some will consider us or blame us for being abusers, even when we out there trying to teach the word. And we don't want that on us. We shouldn't have. We should be far and separate from that. And we just got to do better. All right. So that's my take on cuss words. I pray this thing was edifying. Y'all be blessed. We'll see you on the next one.